Hello, good morning, and many thanks indeed for joining us here on Morning Prime. It is the 25th of January 2023, and of course, we are so grateful that you've afforded time to join us and choosing KTN News as your channel of choice to inform you today. The country is still mourning the falling of a gallant son soil. This is Professor George Magoha, who passed on yesterday. And today we reflect on what substantial difference he has brought to the world of academia, from a guitarist to a consummate urologist, a surgeon. Magoha had made this country move miles in the world of academia, and him as an administrator in the public office, he went back to what he loved most, and that was teaching. And this, he just signed up with Mercenaries University before his demise, and we'll be discussing about him this morning. And this is what also is hogging the headlines this morning as the country mourns. Aside from that, we'll be looking at, of course, the latest development with the Raila reinvention, and him also stating that he doesn't recognize President Ruto's presidency. What does it really portend for security? What does it portend for democracy? What does it portend for the president himself, having one faction of a country that is not with him? Also, we'll be crossing over to Rwanda and DR Congo, where there are allegations of the Russian soldiers in Rwanda, especially that mercenary, the Wagner, that are in Russia, that are in Congo, I should say. And now that is also stoking a lot of debate on the invasion of, or having this boots on the ground, not really the invasion, but having this boots on the ground as far as the security or insecurity in Congo is concerned. The Pope will be visiting the DR Congo together with high-powered delegates, Christian leaders also, who will be heading over to Congo and South Sudan. We want also to discuss that and what it does really portend for those two nations that they have been embroiled in warring factions. We're joined by our analyst, Dr. Hassan Kanenje, who is the director of the Horn Institute. Also, we're joined by Irungu Houghton, who is the executive director of the Amnesty International Kenya. And also we have with us Professor Peter Kagwanja, who is the CEO of Africa Policy Institute, and will be joined momentarily by Hamid Hashi, who is a governance and policy analyst. Just want to give them a sporting chance to say hi this morning. Yeah, beginning with you, Dr. Kanenje. Good morning.
Good morning, Dibal, and good morning to Kenyans who are watching. It is indeed a sad day in Kenya. We just lost one of the most distinguished scholars. It is extremely difficult to train a surgeon, and not a surgeon of his, much less a surgeon of his caliber, Professor Magoha. I think, of course, prayers with his family for strength. But when we have things, we tend to take them for granted. I think that's what we should remember. And we should always do our best to make sure that such people are actually properly utilized while they're still alive. So let's not just glorify them in their death, but what did we do with them when they were still alive? It doesn't mean they were perfect, but it also demonstrates their unique contributions to the nation, especially in the likes of Professor Magoha. I'm sure my colleagues have a little bit more to talk about, and Professor Peter Kagwanja here, I think that was your colleague at some point. Thank you.
Right. Let's hear from Irungu Houghton. Good morning. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Kenyans. I also would like to follow off from where Hassan has spoken, which is really just to offer my condolences to the family and to the friends and the community, really, that Magoha built in his 71 years around him. He died on World Education Day, somewhat poignant, and also he died at a point where there has been a swirling debate about the quality of our examinations and whether there has been a raft of examinations cheating. And if we remember well, it was Magoha and the former CS Matiang'i that really paid quite a lot of attention to ensuring that integrity returned to our examinations. The other thought I have, of course, it's much too early to paint a full picture of him. He was a creative. We see he was a guitarist. At some point, he was a gang member, and he also became a surgeon and a cabinet secretary. And I think one of the lasting impressions I will have is that after he served the nation at probably one of the most important levels, he went back to teaching. And this does send a message to all state officers and public civil servants that actually being rooted in your profession is the best way that you can serve the nation, rather than simply occupying positions in which you have no knowledge of what they're about. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Indeed, Peter Karanja, we want to hear from you as well. He was your colleague.
Yeah. Well, I would say that Professor Magoha was one of the most consequential dons of our time. Consequential in the sense that it is during his time when strikes in the university reached the lowest level, because over and above being a disciplinarian, he was also a very, sociable person in terms of consulting with the young and so on. And we found quite a number of his students, particularly in the university leadership, getting to public leadership, meaning you'd argue that when he was at the University of Nairobi, he was really a mentor as well. You find Babu, and others, quite a number of young people, Sakajas and so on, getting to Mother Wangari from Gilgil. All those are people who were mentored under his time. But for me, as a senior colleague and boss at the University of Nairobi, where I served as adjunct professor under him until he became minister, I think he created a good environment for academic to thrive. Obviously, there were those issues that he's not raising as much money, so he did not really jump into this, throwing the university into the marketplace. He was extremely cautious, turning the university into a kiosk or a money minting kind of a venture. And therefore, that striking of the balance perhaps is what won him the CS, where he also demonstrated his disciplinarian approach to critical issues like examinations and so on. So he fitted very well into Matiang'i's footsteps as a minister, and even went on to uplift the ministry. I was personally a beneficiary of his work at that level. I know he appointed me as the chairman of Board of Governors at Murang'a Technical. He also appointed me as the chair of the National Research Council. He never finished that job himself. No, he finished his job himself, but the other side of the government did finish it. And when he was doing that, he was very clear, Professor, you must make this college work, and otherwise we're going to shut it down. So he was not just a person who was throwing tokens here and there. He was a person who gave you a task and expected an outcome out of it. So we've lost really a great Kenyan, particularly the academic side of things. And I would argue again that he's one of the most consequential dons of our time. He really was very, very consequential. So 71 years, yes, but very, very fruitful years.
George Magoha, 1952-2023. This is what the People Daily is holding. Kenya mourns a gallant son. And you heard was a consequential, a very consummate, of course, academician in the country. Substantial contribution he's made in that arena. And we want to hear from Mohammed Ashi as well. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, good morning, my friends. Well, I heard of this last night, actually. I was under the loop yesterday. And I pass my condolences to the family of Mr. Magoha. Actually, it's pronounced Magoha. There's a ha in it, because I think it's from the borderline of the Luos and the Luyas here in Western Kenya. But I hear that he was from Luo Nyanza. I do not know the man very well. I know that his family and his community and his friends and his contemporaries are mourning over his death. And Debal, I come from the Islamic faith. When you die, Your body is just like a shoe. We wash it and throw it in the hole. It takes us 15 minutes, and we say goodbye to you that way. And I know that now there's going to be a whole week maybe or two of mourning. A couple of bulls are going to be slaughtered somewhere in Western Kenya. And we just want to wish the family and the community there who are grieving for their son, nawaambia poleni sana man. Maisha ina mwisho.
Maisha ina mwisho. This is what is, of course, headlining the dailies, as you can see, beginning with the Standard this morning. The guitarist who became minister, Professor George Albert Omore Magoha, 1952-2023, mourning an icon from accidental artist in Nairobi's Eastlands to a top urological surgeon and tough academic administrator. Magoha's uncompromising approach saw him become one of the country's most memorable education ministers ever. He exited the stage yesterday, age 71, 6 to 7. Is the pages that you can actually read this story about him. I have been privileged to know and work with the late professor in many capacities, from the university where I completed my postgraduate studies, and later in cabinets where he was my colleague. We have lost a gifted, unique, distinguished and great servant of Kenya. This the sentiments of President William Ruto. You can read that story inside the Standard. On the side, but there's a special report today on page 2 and 3 about this grand church where the sick are chained. A man in chains at Coptic Church in Kisumu listens to the institution's founder, Father John Pesa, and the story continues inside the Standard today. Chebukati spills the beans on push to change polls results. That is on page 8 of the Standard. On top here, we have the teaser where CS is warning principals on uniforms cartels, and you have your Enterprise magazine that comes in handy for you every Wednesday. You can pick a copy of a Standard for you to access that. More Matatus investors eye electric vehicles, and Treasury sets out a plan to sell parastatals. This is all about privatization that President Ruto has been intent on. You can read all the details on page 24 of the Standard this morning. The Daily Nation, you saw it, is all about Magoha as well. George Magoha, 1952-2023, no nonsense, former education minister, or cabinet secretary, I should say, professor of medicine and tough university administrator who did not suffer fools, gladly died suddenly of cardiac arrest last evening, dealing a double blow to a family that was preparing to bury another son, Professor Richard Magoha, this weekend. And that story is on page 6 and 7 of the Daily Nation this morning. Life and times of former education CS Professor Magoha is a splash on the front page of a Star. Tragedy, controversial college don collapsed at home and rushed to City Hospital. That story on page 2. Azimio top guns defy Raila on Ruto recognition. You can see the picture there. And this is Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua and President William Ruto with Azimio leaders during a tour of Home Bay on January the 14th. Chief guest, of course, was the president there. And Chebukati, Tuju offered reward to tilt results in favor of Raila. Former polls agency chairperson Wafula Chebukati on Tuesday said that Raphael Tuju offered to reward him if he changed elections results to favor Azimio leader Raila Odinga. That story is on page 2. And poor and learned, death sentence awaits if you rob, commit murder. If you're poor, uneducated, and kill someone or commit robbery with violence, there is a high chance you'll be sentenced to death. If convicted, that is a new study which is revealing this, and that story continues on page 8 of the Star. On top here, parents relieved as state makes uniform more affordable. That is on page 4 and 5 of the Star. And Kenya mourns a gallant son, as we saw. There is a People Daily, NHF in spotlight over a deal on crash survivors. And there are new rules to guide junior secondary as all schools open. We have also the Business Daily, which is carrying this particular splash this morning. IMF projects, IMF projects Ethiopia, Angola, Economist to overtake Kenya. Kenya relegated to 5th largest economy in Africa. Nairobi weekend in race for wealthy foreign investors. We saw 600 actually European or investors from the European Union are eyeing Tanzania, and why are they bypassing Kenya? And you can see the headlines today. You can read all the details inside the Business Daily. There is a new bill that will eliminate Parliament's nod in sale of parastatal. New bill eliminates Parliament's nod in sale of parastatal. Read all about this bill inside the Business Daily this morning. Courier ban sale of uniforms in schools. That is a story that you want to follow inside the Business Daily this morning. In Uganda, this is what you're waking up to. Key milestone as oil drilling starts. Key milestone as oil drilling starts. That is the splash there. A team of political leaders, security chiefs, religious leaders, technocrats, oil investors, and that is Bunyoro Kingdom. Top officials joined President Museveni in switching on the Kingfisher oil drilling rig as the country rushes against time to start oil production by the end of 2025. That you have all that on page 5, that and more on page 5, 4, 5, and 6 of the Daily Monitor in Uganda. The Citizen up next. Tanzania's top tech players share pathways to success. You can read all about them inside The Citizen today. And also, climate change, why we need strong measures. Government warns as Tarimo's body arrives from Russia. Government warns as Tarimo's body arrives from Russia is another story you can follow inside The Citizen this morning. In Tanzania, in Rwanda, IMF boasts on Rwanda's economic potential. Climate championship is a splash. Rwanda is a pace setter for climate initiatives in the region. DR Congo fighter jet shot at after violation. That is an interesting story that also we shall be looking at it. And you can see that picture there of a Sukhoi 25 fighter jet from DR Congo, which violated Rwanda's airspace on Tuesday. That is yesterday, prompting Rwanda to take a defensive measure. This is the third time in 3 months that Rwanda's airspace has been violated by DR Congo's military aircraft. And now this one was shot at yesterday. This also will be part of our discussion today on Global Today. Rwanda's fast education progress celebrated a UNESCO report, and women make up majority of human traffickers in Rwanda. That is a new report as well. You can read all about it inside the New Times. Russia question in Congo conflict is what is headlining the East African this week. Claims that DRC has imported European mercenaries to help it round M23 rebels have raised queries about commitment to a truce. Rwanda now accuses Kinshasa of preparing for war in spite of ongoing peace efforts. And this story continues on page 4 and 5 of the East African this week. And we shall also be probing that question of South Africa and Russia cementing their ties. South Africa is playing China and Russia's card against US with joint naval exercise. That is a story that we want to also follow today here on Global. The Economist, Turkey's looming dictatorship is what is on the front page of The Economist. As you can see, a special report there on Erdogan's empire. That is what you can follow. And myths busting young consumers' incomes in America, how to find an alien. That is some of the stories also tucked away inside the latest copy of The Economist. Back home, we want now to decipher the editorial cartoons. We begin with what is in the Standard there. And it's all about what we saw on Monday with the return of Raila from South Africa, where he was on a tour all the way straight to Kamukunji for the People's Baraza Forum, where he has been very categorical that he is not recognizing President William Ruto as the president of Kenya. And I want us just to put it in full screen so that we can decipher it with our panelists, just beginning with Irungu Houghton. This is Canon in 2017. If you may pick up a copy of a Standard there and you see the editorial page that Gado has drawn. Canon in 2017, Canon 2023. It's the same faces. And we can see Chameleon there with the tongue wagging. Also, we have a new entry there. They actually changed faces. If you could see 2023, who were the people who were promising Kenyans the Canon. And the Canon in 2017, we had Musalia, we had Wetangula, and we had Kalonzo. This time forth, we have Raila, also Eugene Wamalwa, Martha Karua, and Kalonzo. Still, we're promising Canon. If I may move on also to the Daily Nation, you may just look at what we have on the screen, since we don't have a copy of the Daily Nation there. Will this fit again? And that is a handshake suit that Raila now is trying to don. And you can see also he's in deep thought there. Let's just hear from you.
So once again, our cartoonists make light of very heavy matters, perhaps. So just enjoying very much the illustrations there. I mean, I think there are a couple of things here. One is, of course, the nation is wondering what is the game theory, what is the play that Azimio has, and particularly His Excellency, the leader of Azimio, Raila Odinga. But I think there are a couple of things here. One is that, you know, everything that he has done, everything that he promotes in terms of the call for assemblies, for dialogue and so on, this is completely within our laws. So the first thing we have to start by saying is that there is no national security threat. I think there is a looming conversation that somehow this is going to threaten the nation and threaten our state. And I think the first thing to do is to ask people to just relax and see this very much as political dialogue, political party dialogue. Zambia just recently, by the head of state, actually passed a law that that repealed the idea of criminal defamation against the presidency. And I think this was an important step in terms of the freedom of expression in Zambia. And I think we should really take that lead in terms of how we approach this issue. What I'm hearing the former Prime Minister say, the leader of Azimio say, essentially is that he does not trust this government. And I think for opposition parties, that is not, an anathema. It is not something that opposition parties don't say globally. It's also not the case that when he speaks, that his 6 million voters, those that voted for him, are in complete unison. So we've seen also a number of voices within his backyard in Luanyanza or in Nyanza, and several parts of the country simply say that we are moving on with other agendas. So I think one of the challenges, I think, for the opposition is to find its feet in a policy context. I think there was a spirited focus on genetically modified organisms towards the end, the introduction of GMO food towards the end of last year. But it seems to me that the call for dialogue and for protests and for assemblies needs to be anchored in a policy framework that gives Kenyans an understanding of what is the agenda of Azimio as an opposition party in parliament and, of course, in political life.
Right. Dr. Hassan Karanja.
Dibal, I think there's really much ado about nothing. The opposition, Dibal, Hashi, please, your time is going to come. Yes, yeah, okay. Don't force me to call you to order. The opposition is doing what the opposition does, really. And that is, and especially, coming from an election that was very close, kind of 50-50, there are people who are still hurt, but they're also, trying to communicate to their electorate and their supporters that we are not dead. We are actually there. We're going to hold people to account. Now, to the extent that they're making statements about not recognizing, the election of the president, we know that the election is over, and the next election is going to be in 2027. But this is not something that is new. 61% of Republicans in the United States still do not recognize Joe Biden. They do not believe he won fairly, and this is, a year or so later, they still don't recognize Joe Biden. And that has not prevented Joe Biden from being president of the United States. Of course, this past election made certain changes with regard to the control of the House. But I think as long as these kind of activities don't degenerate into violence, because then that tends to scare away investors. That tends to affect, the way people run their lives. I think the opposition should continue to do their work. And those, especially in the ruling party, will be best advised to actually focus on just delivering for Kenyans, because that is a better narrative and more persuasive in trying perhaps to blunt some of the grievance politics that will be coming from the other side. But I think if we're going to obsess over how many rallies people are going to hold, I think we're going to get very petty and then lose focus. Then whatever impact, for instance, that is the other side is seeking is going to be able to be registered. So, let's stop the noise. This is a theatrics, okay, and I think it's going to settle.
Mm-hmm. It's going to settle, but could we speak maybe to the bigger aspect of what brand of politics we are being subjected to? Because people were saying, we've moved on, we're on issue-based politics, we don't want to have rallies, we don't want to have protests, and Raila himself, being a very pivotal reformist in this country, in this epoch of time, with his brand of politics, does it fit snugly with where we are right now?
Perhaps if I can add to that.
Right?
If you can allow me. You see, and Professor Karanja, might attest to this. Those people who vote on issues the world over are actually very few. Mm-hmm. They're not very many. Mm-hmm. Okay. In the US, some of them are called independents. Mm-hmm. You have a certain percentage of Democrats who will always vote that way, and a certain percentage of Republicans. And the world over, it's like that. And so those who get swayed are actually very, very, very few. And so to the extent that, you see, it is, I think, fancy and, for lack of a better word, a little bit sexy to talk about, we are now issue-based politics. No, we years away from that. There is a very, very small percentage that actually goes with issues. A lot of people are going to be driven by emotions and the current grievance and the history of how things have been going. So when people feel maybe they've been left out, of course, it doesn't matter whether what you're doing is actually benefits them. They're going to oppose you. Or they're going to support you, whether they're even starving. And we've seen this not just in Kenya or other parts of Africa, but in the rest of the world, including the United States.
Right.
So it's a myth.
Okay.
I agree with Dr. Karanja. Let me summarize politics as a product of two things that do not at all agree with your view of the so-called objective politics and so issue-based politics. Politics is about grievance. Full stop. Mm-hmm. It's not about anything else, just, grievance. If you don't have a grievance, you are not in politics. So you must create a grievance, that's one. Second, politics, in terms of strategies, about fallacies. It's not about objectivity, it's not about truth, it's not about all these things we talk about. It's all about fallacies. And like now, you see, I would say, according to a whistleblower, you are dealing with a fallacy here, because the fallacy about authority, that I have a hidden authority who told me. And that will move followers to miles and miles of support to that. Not that they want to know. And this has become even more pronounced in the age of what we are calling post-truth politics, where now the fiction is more powerful than the fact. Mm-hmm. And as such, then, I would want to contribute towards this debate from that perspective, that I'm not really looking for a truth-based kind of politics. I'm not looking for issue-based kind of politics. One want to understand what are the strategies behind what is happening, and how then can we judge whether issues. First, this is about opposition politics. Raila wants to assert himself in the opposition as the kingpin of the opposition. Remember, he's coming from a point of defeat in a situation where it was not expected. Kalonzo would like to be the heir. Mother Karo would like to be the heir. Somebody else would like to be the heir of the opposition. How do you assert your own position and make yourself undisputed in the opposition? How do you create Baba the Sixth? Because Baba the Fifth didn't work. So to make Baba the Sixth, you need to radicalize politics within the opposition to a point that everybody else become a follower and you become the leader of the opposition. So that's one thing to talk about within the opposition. So even what you see in Kamukunji, what you're going to see in Jacaranda and elsewhere, is basically a dramatization of opposition politics in order to assert the incumbency of the person who is there. The second thing is basically the backdrop to what is happening with the tribunal. The tribunal is coming up with very dangerous kind of politics because the allegations and the kind of evidence that is coming from Chebukati and others has criminal, intentions. And it is possible that somebody can be picked and to answer for criminal charges on interference. So how do you counter that? You counter that by radicalizing politics. If I were right, I would do the same. I would radicalize it. I don't think he has even done it. And you start by literally going for the king, not for everybody else. So you deny that there was a Ruto president. In fact, Ruto is not even in State House, according to this narrative. If he is there, he's a pretender to the throne. That's what is imagined. And we are radicalizing and moving politics that far as a defensive mechanism against any charge that there was a criminal intent at Bomas and elsewhere in other meetings. So again, that backdrop must be taken into account. And finally, obviously, there is a question, there is a movement across the world, and I like reading and watching, Raila's politics. He's a quintessential, engineer. Engineer work with a plan, This is the end game, and this is what we want to get. In 2007, it is the Orange Revolution. Mm-hmm. Where is Orange Revolution? Ukraine. In other cases, you see models, being sworn in, Philippines and so on. Today, it is Brazil. And the self-coup. Mm-hmm. And the self-coups are not taking place immediately. They take place months after the election and the vote is counted and the people are even sworn in. In Brazil, Lula da Silva was sworn in. In America, at least, Trump was trying to prevent the swearing in or the confirmation of Joe Biden. Is Raila trying to replicate the self-coups of Brazil, Peru, and America? This is something you need to to think about. What is the end game in this denial of President Ruto? What is the end game in this now hyping up of opposition radicalism? What's the end game? The end game is basically that you have a popular insurrection, and therefore the people who are there, which is Azimio, come back. So the comeback of Azimio can only be envisaged within the context of the self-coups that are taking place in Brazil and in America. And I articulated it on Sunday in my article on Sunday Nation on the same. The phenomenon which is now popular globally is the self-coup. What was popular in 2007 was the Orange Revolution. You deny that you have lost, you pour your people into the streets and take over power. That he succeeded by becoming the prime minister. In 2023, is Raila going to succeed to topple Ruto through popular uprising? What is going to happen? Obviously, the impact is that it is also radicalizing the government side. If you listen to the rhetoric that's coming from Deputy President Gachagua and others, and Gachagua is basically on the warpath. Ruto, let me leave this guy to me. Let me deal with him. And what methods are you going to use to deal with this kind of insurgency? If it becomes eventually an insurgency from Jacaranda moving forward. So the country, we might want to deny, Dr. Kanenje, we might want to deny, but the country is getting into a very slippery path. And we need to stop that and move back to what the bar is talking about. We need to move to responsible opposition that deals with the issues using modern tools. The age of activism is over. The age of streets is over. Give us a paper about GMO and let us, as citizens, go to the streets. Give us a paper about other issues. don't take us to the streets, because streets can only bring insurrection. That's all.
All right, thank you. Right, we wound up on that with Hashi.
Well, there are only two tragedies in life. One is getting what you want, and the other one is not getting what you want. That's a guy from a guy called Oscar Wilde. Well, I've been ad nauseum speaking here about the failure of our political class and the failure of our political culture. And we are a tribal people. I find the rhetoric by my colleagues upon issues and independence obfuscating the real garrisons of ethnicity in this country, which has not been demolished. I find it appalling that both sides, President Ruto and Mr. Odinga, have decided again to take the people of this country who are divided right in the middle over where we should go and what we should do by getting all the poor people in this country into the streets and getting all the hackneyed allies of the president into government. So, it is, I think it's very, very, very crucial for us to understand that our political structure has something to do with this. I've always argued against this first across the post Debal. That is why every other appointment today you see on the Gazette is Kinyanjui and Arab Kipto. And you cannot find other Kenyans in those Gazette notices. And that's why in the opposition Debal, Mr. Odinga continues to bring about to a boiling point. And this is going to happen, what's called mass action. Debal, I predict that Mr. Ruto, being a pastoralist, is not going to react with chewing gum. He's going to send the GSU, Debal, to the streets. And people may die. And this will now bring out the divisions we had over the Supreme Court. And the wounds will be open again. And there will be viciousness. There will be the rule of the day in this country. And that is because, Debal, the political leadership in this country that we have, Debal, are probably some of the most vindictive human beings I have seen. So, Debal, there is a history between Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Odinga. There's a history between Mr. Ruto and Mr. Odinga. There's a history between all these players in the political game. And I think, Debal, that the vindictiveness is now showing up because in our politics, in this continent, it's either I get the seat or I make sure that you get nothing. In my language, there's a comprehensive term for it. Adiyahu, ama anku'une, ama anku'idei, which means that, oh, you nice steak. If I don't eat you, I'm going to throw sand at it so that you don't eat it as well. So, Debal, I think that a new generation of politicians needs to come out of this. And what we need to do is restructure this useless first across the post system, because we're a tribal people. Mm-hmm. And we need to get a parliamentary system of government where all the big tribes and the small tribes can sit down and discuss tribalism. And then look at the English constitution, speak English, go to Serena and have lunch. But when they're going to the power brokers, they're going to speak their language. One is going to speak Kalenjin, one is going to speak Agikuyu, one is going to speak Somali. It is the conundrum of the uneven economy and the uneven political culture we have. What is the solution to our problems, Debal? If I could just say one or two words. We need to get a new political template in which the National Assembly, we have a British heritage, that the National Assembly, where we have members of Parliament come to Parliament, choose a Prime Minister and a President, and the leading parties share power. Mm-hmm. Because leaving people out of power, Debal, leaves them out of the productive capacities. We don't have a private sector in this country. It is the state that prints money, that does trade, that we then essentially just take money from, corruption. And that's how this country has been heaving and hoving in about the last 60 years. So, Debal, I put it to you that I think Mr. Odinga should leave politics. It's my view. He should retire and go to his farm. That's my view. And I think that Mr. Ruto is a very poor leader because he should have, in the beginning, Debal, been very magnanimous. He would have cut this thing a long time ago if he had reached out to the divide. He just won by 200,000 votes. He doesn't have a mandate. He has a very slight edge. So he should have tried to bring the country together as a together to bring the people together, reach out to Mr. Kenyatta, reach out to Mr. Odinga, and talk about the future of this country and how we can help each other. But if the political game in this country is a zero-sum game, well, so be it. The ethnic groups are going to come out, there will be trouble. The economy, Debal, in our country, we're now in a recession, the biggest recession since independence. People can hardly afford food. So, Debal, I don't think we should mince words as public intellectuals about the way forward. We should call out how the things are. We should call out this criminal behavior and criminal political culture that we have. And I think at the end of the day that there is a huge responsibility on the person sitting as president of this country. When you name the entire political culture of our country as competition, this is not the steeplechase. This is not the 3,000 steeplechase in the Olympics. This is about human beings and society. It's not a competition. It is about civilization. How do we make our civilization here work? And how are we going to jettison our ethnic biases and ethnic moribund policies? At the end of the day, I put it to you, Fanon was quite right, and is the wretched of the earth. These are the pitfalls of national consciousness.
Thank you. Dr. Karanja, you wanted to add something? We wind up on...
Prof, I actually agree with you in entirety with regard to the potential risks, but I don't see the risk coming from politicking. I see the problem, especially in Kenya, is political brinkmanship, where you're having two sides that are very uncompromising without sometimes appreciating the role of each other. They have to play within the Kenyan body politic. Just to give an example in terms of the political map of the last election, in the so-called, the traditional older provinces, for instance, there's a Mio group, I think, won 6 out of 8. And so there could be a sense that they represent a vast plurality of Kenyans. Now, to the extent the election was 50-50, it is important for reason to prevail. But the history of political brinkmanship that we have, meaning you don't want to cede anything, and then we kind of make statements that do not make the other party, whether they're the ones in government or they're the ones in the opposition, actually want to even talk, is where the problem is. Many countries have political competitions. Some actually even more fierce and closer than ours, like Israel, for instance, But somehow, a lot of times, they manage to put together government and survive for a few years and then perhaps, form another one. But then the country doesn't suffer as a result. With us, our politics, because of brinkmanship, it tends to raise political temperatures in ways in which, number one, it causes violence. 2, it scares away investors, which hurts our economy, ultimately. And as a bellwether state on democracy on the continent, I think that does not bode very well. So we need to learn to listen a little bit more and shut up our pie holes most of the time.
All right.
2 quick comments. I personally think that the greatest danger, the greatest trigger for violence is not the call for assemblies. I don't think this is a big issue. I think where the places we need to look at is the electoral reforms that are taking place in the National Assembly, because there is a number of concerns with some of the steps that are being put in place in terms of who will determine the next electoral commission. And I think if there is a considerable opinion within the political parties and possibly within the public that the process is being skewed already to determine an outcome in 2027, that election will be rendered dead in the water before it even happens. So that's the first thing I think that we need to look at. The second issue relates to the point that Prof has just raised in terms of the tribunal. If the tribunal is seen as a witch hunt, if it does not give an opportunity for the right of reply, that there is no fair administrative process in that, I think what will happen, you will see the temperatures begin to grow. These are the places where I think the triggers are most dangerous.
I think that's true. We need to accept that the trajectory that we have taken is likely to lead us to more tensions. There's no doubt about that. Because the radicalization of politics on both sides of the aisle cannot be said to be business as usual. That's one. The second thing is that we have a constitution that we're experimenting on implementing. Kenyans have no history of implementing the presidential system. And what we do know, and I think that's what my friend Hashi is talking to, we know this politics of consensus. And the politics of consensus means talking after a fight, you sit back and talk. And then you find, well, what is the amicable way of moving forward? And we assume that because we are tribes, then we must talk as tribes. I have a serious problem with that myself, because we have committed ourselves to a system until we change it. That we are in a game theory kind of a relationship where there must be a winner and a loser. And that when you lose, you accept that you have lost the election. And then you allow the system to go on until the next appointment, which is 10th of August, 2027. We even know the date that the next tournament is going to take place. So it's not a question about, it's all about waiting. But here we have, and this is very sad, and we need to call it as it is, that, Argentina has won the trophy, and France and all other losers want to kiss the trophy. It doesn't make sense at all. It is the right of the Argentinians to walk around and kiss their trophy because they won it. And you cannot talk about exclusion, ethnic exclusion and all that because others are kissing their trophy. They won it. Because we have committed ourselves to a game theory. So we are changing the game after the event. That you want to define victory and who is going to benefit from victory collectively, when in essence the war for victory was done in a different way. We must be truthful to the principles we commit to. We've committed to the principle of competition and fair competition. And that's why we have the Supreme Court as the adjunct. We have the Electoral Commission. If you're not happy with the commission, you appeal to the Supreme Court. And like Mother Karanja does, if you're not also happy, you seek an opinion from the East African Court of Justice and get an opinion. You may not get a judgment, but you're going to get an opinion. So my view is, the Hashis of this world and others who think that the post-election consensus building is all about, kowtowing to, let people enjoy their victory. They invested in it, they had it. It is painful. I can just imagine where President Kenyatta is. It's very, very painful. I can imagine where Raila is. It's very painful. My friend, Peter Kenneth, who invested everything in it, is painful. For me, it's painful. For everybody, it's painful, but we must say this is the cost of democracy until we decide to change. If we want now to go into consensus politics, we can do that because we are Kenyans. We can do that. But for now, let Kenya Kwanza kiss their trophy. Leave them alone.
Can I just add to this?
Yes.
The idea that idea is that in the word, the euphemism that he uses is actually quite apt. But you could see the Argentinians winning the game on the TV.
I knew the
You can see the picture before.
There's no question about this. There's no question. You could see the goals. You could see there's a replay on the video. Argentina won the game. There's no question about that in my mind.
Are you saying political parties are still watching replays?
Yes.
I'm trying to wait for...
But can I just finish? I don't want to lose my take. So the ball, it's quite obvious that we know what the problem is, but we choose the ostrich policy. And Mr. Ruto, President Ruto, won the election by, do you remember the map? It was a little yellow somewhere, and the whole place was blue. And that
was the Waterloo.
Yeah,
that was Waterloo. But it made a change.
And the concentration was here in the mountain and up there with about 1.8 in Rift Valley, some sections of Rift Valley, and 20,000-30,000 the rest of the place. Now, the ball in a majoritarian system of government, if you looked at the CNN and you'd put the red and the blues, you'd think that the blues won it. Any American walking into any TV station in Kenya would say, looks like the blues have it. But no, it was the yellow who got it. So there is something wrong with us. And under this debate, there is not Yorkshiremen and Englishmen, who sit down at 4 o'clock and have a cup of tea. There will 80% of the people living under $1 a day without proper housing, plumbing, or water. We're a third world country where unemployment is at 80%. The last time I saw statistics here, they said only 9% of the people in Kenya have gainful employment. Our country is a wreck. Let me tell you why it's a wreck, according to the statistics. Forget about my experience with living here and being born here, and being a citizen. I believe firmly, Debal, that if we leave people behind and take the philosophy of the Roman Empire that my senior learned friend here adjudicates about, then we are forgetting there's a country called Kenya. And first across the post is the misery of our nation, Debal. And this started when President Jomo Kenyatta in the 1960s collapsed the office of the governor, the prime ministership, and then created the Kiambu Mafia. And from then on, Moi followed the road. You know, President Moi's Nyayo philosophy was meant following in Jomo Kenyatta's footsteps. That's what it meant. Then he promised Kenyatta's son to be president. He said, wewe utakuwa, alafu patia huyo uhuru. And that's what happened. And this time, but the only problem in this country, there's this fellow called Raila Odinga and his dad, who have been making everything topsy-turvy for everybody in this country who wants to eat their rice and ugali peacefully. There's no such thing as eating ugali and having it too in this country, if I can paraphrase the English language. I firmly believe that we ought to stand up as Africans on the seaboard of eastern seaboard of this and deal with our ancestors. The problem, Debal, is our ancestors. They gave us this political culture, and they did not listen to the British system that we had, and they wanted the one-man rule. Debal, is the same thing, say, in Cameroon. Canadians are going there to fix. Canadians from Manitoba, people who grow wheat and oats. They're going to this place called Cameroon to go and tell the people that your president, who lives in Switzerland and eats a Swiss cake there for the last 20 years, he hasn't shown up in his country, and he's still the president. We have to change, Debal. If we don't change, if we don't deal with this ethnic shit, excuse my language, if we don't deal with this ethnic nonsense, Debal, we are going to go down the drain. How many failed states are around our region? Look at Somalia. There are one people, one nation, one faith, and they failed. Do you know why they failed, Debal? Because of political leadership. Nothing to do with this ethnicity. Our leaders just want to sit at the trough, eat these poor children's taxes, and then go to Europe and act as if they're white people. We have to change or we're going to sink.
Indeed. We want to take a short break.
I just wanted to leave one comment. I mean, I think Prof here had this wonderful comment about football and replays, and I just thought, you know, there was a famous professor, a scientist by the name of Einstein, who used to say, you know, that madness is the art of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting another result. I think we now have an upgrade.
Thank you.
The upgrade is this. Madness is watching the replay and expecting a different result.
A different result.
Yeah, right touch.
Yes. All right.
You've not finished implementing the 2010 Constitution, and you are still,
and we supported France. But we are very unhappy. But it was on replay. So
no, yeah, but you did not see France rushing to kiss the trophy. That's what I was arguing. It's not about who won or who didn't win, but whoever was declared the winner, because there had to be a referee to declare winners and losers.
We need to take a short break. Yeah. Maybe more so, Justin, my director, may pick up this cartoon of the replays Raila has been watching. And this was the editorial cartoon yesterday we had with Ozone. The replay from Moi's era as well, he's been watching. The replay from Mwai Kibaki's era as well, he's been watching it. And the replay from Uhuru Kenyatta's, of course, he's been watching it, the VAR. And now we have the current regime. This is President William Ruto. So this is a metamorphosis of Raila Odinga with the same narrative, which is no, 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 no. And power sharing after.
Yeah, I think his time is up. Yeah.
007, become Prime Minister. 2017,
thank you.
You want to become, you know, whatever, is it co-principal? As they were called, the Azimio.
2007,
It is
Right,
not
thank you.
about
We'll take a
stealing.
short break right now. When we circle back, we look at what is on the front page of the East African this week. Very important. The Russian question in Congo conflict, and claims that DRC has imported European mercenaries to help it around M23 rebels have raised queries about commitment to a truce. Rwanda now accuses Kinshasa of preparing for war in spite of ongoing peace efforts. And this story is on page 4 and 5. We know that previously the president of DRC had ruled out bringing in Russian mercenaries to help quell the raging conflict. However, as per our report, Western diplomats are deeply worried about the sudden appearance of Eastern European mercenaries in the volatile Eastern Congo, despite DRC's denying rumors about Kinshasa's hiring the Wagner Group abound. As per the report, since around Christmas 2022, white military personnel from Eastern Europe have fully booked a hotel located near the international airport of Goma in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. As per a local journalist, they wear a variety of uniforms with no national flags and pistols on belts. That is their holsters as well. We take a short break. When we circle back, we want to ask this question: what are the Wagners doing in Congo? And also that South Africa really warming up to Russia and China with the naval exercise, despite also the international hue and cry regarding that. We take a short break. Don't go away.